Welcome to TYT. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us today and filling in for Cenk Uygur is Farron Cousins, host of Farron Balanced, good friend of the show. And I'm really happy you're here with me today. Farron, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, we've got a lot of stories to get to today, including Matt Gaetz proudly mocking the physical appearance of other people without really taking a good hard look at himself. We'll also talk about how Republicans are moving ahead with efforts to attempt to ban abortion federally, even after they spouted their lies about wanting to keep abortion a states' rights issue. In the second hour, I'll be joined by Wosny Lambre. We'll lighten things up a little bit. There's a wealthy multi-million-dollar preacher who recently got robbed while live streaming his sermon. And I've got some mixed feelings on that story, and you'll understand why once I give you the details. So definitely stick around for the second hour and our bonus episode, where we will talk about TikTok scams, including one woman who sold a pretty gross concoction without FDA approval on TikTok. It's honestly, what amazes me is how easy it is to get people to buy things. And maybe if we were a little more careful with what we're willing to spend our money on, some of these grifters and scammers wouldn't get away with the things they get away with. But before we get to all of that, just want to encourage you guys to like and share the stream. Also, apologies, I am usually a little more professional looking on the show, but it is hot as hell today in LA. My AC is broken. It is not an easy day, but I'm gonna get through the show. We're gonna have an awesome program for you. And why don't we get started with the attempts to federally ban abortion?
There's no easy way to say this, but your baby has a catastrophic brain abnormality.
What does that mean?
It means that parts of her brain didn't form. Your daughter, if she is to survive, will live only a matter of hours after birth. During that time, she will experience a multitude of seizures and ultimately aspirate on her own bodily fluids. She will suffer. A decision will need to be made on termination. I wish I could tell you what to do, but there's only one person who can make this choice.
How much time do I have?
And that person is Greg.
Greg?
Who the f is Greg?
Yeah, let me just give him a call. Hey, Greg. Dr. Robinson here.
What you just saw was a new ad by Mothers Against Greg Abbott PAC. And it's quite a doozy because it shows what the real situation is in the state of Texas, where abortions have been banned, where abortion providers are terrified to provide care to women in the case of something like a miscarriage, for instance. And there are already stories to share with you involving real women who have suffered the consequences, and we'll outline them for you in just a moment. But it's important to keep in mind that the ad is not in any way hyperbole, it's not an exaggeration. What we're seeing in red states across the country, including in Texas, is an effort and also the execution of policies that put politicians, particularly white conservative males, between women and their doctors. And I want to outline one particular story that was covered in the New York Times about a 35-year-old woman named Amanda. Amanda and her husband want to have children. They tried, and unfortunately, she miscarried, not once, but twice. But her two miscarriages led to different experiences thanks to what the policies were in Texas at the time. Now, before abortion was banned in Texas, she and her husband tried to get pregnant. She did get pregnant, and within her first trimester, unfortunately, she was saddened to learn that she suffered a miscarriage. The fetus did not have a heartbeat. She was miscarrying, and in order to ensure that she doesn't hemorrhage from it or have some sort of infection as a result of that non-viable fetal tissue, the hospital offered to do a surgical procedure that's the same surgical procedure that's done during a regular first trimester abortion. At a large hospital, a doctor performed a surgical procedure often used as a safe and quick method to remove tissue from a failed pregnancy. She awoke from anesthesia to find a card signed by the nurses and a little pink and blue bracelet with a butterfly charm, a gift from the hospital to express compassion for her loss. It was so sweet because it's such a hard thing to go through, Amanda said. Now, 8 months later, unfortunately, she suffered another miscarriage. Remember, she and her husband desperately want to have children. But by the time she had her second miscarriage, laws had changed in Texas. And the same facility that she went to for care denied her the care that she had previously received. So she said she went to the same hospital, Baylor Scott and White Medical Center, doubled over in pain and screaming as she passed a large blood clot. But when she requested the same surgical evacuation procedure called dilation and curettage, or DNC, she said the hospital told her no. A DNC is the same procedure used for some abortions. Now, they were terrified that if they actually did this, even though they're dealing with a miscarriage, that the state would come after them. And the way that it would work is, of course, some private citizen can report this facility, and the doctors that provide the care could get into a lot of trouble. The hospital sent her home, according to the New York Times, with instructions to return only if she was bleeding so excessively that her blood filled a diaper more than once an hour. Hospital records that Amanda shared with the New York Times noted that her embryo had no cardiac activity during the visit and on an ultrasound a week earlier. She reports having a lot of pain and she appears distressed, the record said. Amanda said she sat on the toilet digging fingernail marks in my wall from the pain. She then moved to the bathtub where her husband held her hand as they both cried. The bathtub water is just dark red, Amanda recalled. For 48 hours, it was like a constant heavy bleed and big clots. In other words, because she was denied the care that she needed, she could have very easily died. And the experience was so dangerous and so traumatic that she and her husband have now decided that they will stop trying to get pregnant because they don't want to go through the dangerous scenario of having a miscarriage in the state of Texas again. And again, I'm giving you guys that very gruesome, graphic, detailed story because what the ad that we showed you earlier depicted is not hyperbole. It is not an exaggeration. This is now a reality for women across the country, thanks to individuals who lie to you and tell you that they care about protecting life. When in reality, as we know, it's all about control. It's all about forcing women to do what male politicians want them to do or what religious leaders think they should do. Essentially, people who have nothing to do with this woman, Amanda, getting in between her and her doctors. That is what's happening in Texas and many other red states across this country right now. And if you think it's just gonna be red states and red states alone, you'd be mistaken. They're focusing on making this federal law. I'll get to that in just a moment. But Farron, I'd like you to jump in and share your perspective, especially as someone from Florida, where Ron DeSantis wants to pass similar legislation.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific. And honestly, it's kind of shocking that we don't already have women that have died from this. We know it's coming. We know it will eventually happen, that we will have women in this country who will die because you have these conservative men, and unfortunately too many conservative women as well, who don't even understand medical science. They don't understand basic human biology. They don't know anything about the human body really, and they're passing these laws to regulate it, which will be a death sentence for far too many women in this country. The horror stories like the one you just told, that's one of several that have been making the headlines in just the last week that we have seen. Women forced to carry dead fetuses for weeks because they cannot get a doctor to remove it from their bodies. That is dangerous. I mean, I have family members that have gone through miscarriages. I have family members that have given birth to stillborn babies. It is a horrifying experience, but they were able to immediately get medical care because at the time we didn't have these laws in place here. They went to the hospital, they got everything, fixed to the degree they had. Obviously, you're still dealing with the emotional trauma from that. And what I'm thinking here, as somebody who's seen the emotional damage this does to individuals, how much more is that emotional damage amplified when a woman has to then live with it, live with the pain, live with the dead fetus in the body for weeks? I mean, we're talking about psychological damage that likely will not be repaired for these women. And that's another thing that nobody's talking about either, is the psychological part of what this is doing to the women going through these horrific stories here.
Well, look, this is my opinion, but I don't think that the psychological damage that women are facing now and will continue to face in coming years is the bug, it's the feature. I think this is part of certain individuals with certain political views wanting to be able to control women regardless of what they go through, both physically and psychologically. And what I find really fascinating about all of these stories that are coming out, including the story of the 10-year-old girl who was raped and got pregnant as a result of that rape in Ohio. You see these right-wingers who have defended anti-abortion policies run away from those anecdotes, run away from those stories, want to deny that those stories exist. And my question is, why do they want to deny it? Aren't they proud of what they've been touting, what they've been fighting for decades? I mean, in their minds, a 10-year-old who gets pregnant as a result of rape should be forced to have her rapist baby. That is what they believe. That's why many of these red states have banned abortion, even in the case of rape. So if you are going to tout that kind of policy, you should be able to defend it. You should be willing to stand by those policies, even if there's a gruesome story involving a 10-year-old who got raped. Even if we're talking about a 35-year-old woman who nearly died as a result of her miscarriage and was denied care when she desperately needed it. You should be able to defend that, but they're unwilling to. They immediately deflect and they immediately go to the place of, this isn't real, this isn't happening, but it's very much real. And if you think that conservatives in this country will just stop at allowing red states to ban abortion, you'd be mistaken. In fact, here is former Vice President Mike Pence, someone that people wrongly referred to as a hero when he did the bare minimum on January 6th, telling us what he plans to do.
Now it falls to this generation to take the case for life to every state and every state house in America. Our freedom agenda calls for advancing pro-life protections in every state in the union, every single one. We call for expanding support for women in crisis pregnancies, to support the unborn and to support the newborn with equal American generosity. And finally, we call for ending all taxpayer funding of abortion and defunding Planned Parenthood once and for all.
Now, let's not forget that Planned Parenthood provides primary health care to men and women across the country, especially in rural areas that don't have hospitals. But final question for you, Farron. Thoughts on Mike Pence using the word freedom in the context of controlling women's bodies?
Yeah, it's I don't want to make a comparison to 1984, but I almost feel like I should. But they use words to mean the opposite of what they actually mean here. And is American generosity is the phrase that really kind of stuck out to me. Like, what the heck does that even mean? Where in America are we being generous with anything right now? Totally. I mean, from the economy to greedflation to the rights that we're stripping away, like we are becoming a hugely oppressive country financially, environmentally. We're oppressive with these rights, and Mike Pence is up there with all of this confidence, with all of this bravado, riding on this big wave of, oh, he was so great in January 6th. I can't wait to see what he does next. He is a monster. Yep. He is the same kind of monster that Donald Trump is, or that Ron DeSantis is, or that Greg Abbott is. He's just in a different wrapper. He is the same horrible candy filling that the rest of them are. And right now, I think there's at least 6 different pieces of legislation in the House that Republicans have written that would, in one way or another, ban abortion on the federal level. They have made it clear when they take back the House, they're gonna start pushing these things. That's why they have these drafts ready. There's the bill in the North Carolina State House that would make it legal for you to kill another person that performs an abortion, or a woman who takes a Plan B pill. That piece of legislation's been stalled in committee in the North Carolina State House for a year, but it still exists, written by Republicans, that they're so pro-life will literally kill you if you try to end a pregnancy. It's nuts, but that's where we are. We have to deal with the nuts because they are pushing us further and further here.
No, we don't have to deal with the nuts. We have to defeat them. We have to fight aggressively. We have to stay focused on accomplishing what we need to accomplish and not get distracted by other garbage. What they've done is effective because they were strategic about dismantling reproductive rights. Pretty soon, I have no doubt that they'll have the Supreme Court dismantle other rights that were previously granted to Americans by a previous Supreme Court that wasn't ideologically driven and wasn't extremely right wing. But make no mistake about it, they're not done, and their terrible policies will not stop at stripping women of their rights. They want to force theocratic rule on the rest of us. And it's not because they even believe in that theology. It's not because they want to protect anyone's life. I mean, come on. Remember George Tiller, who was an abortion provider, an abortion doctor? He was murdered by a pro-life activist / murderer / terrorist. Like that is what we have seen in this country. And we have to fight back. We have to stay focused on this issue and many others. Otherwise, they're gonna run roughshod. And they're going to dismantle all the freedoms that we've appreciated and enjoyed in this country. Well, I wanna get to one other story before we take a break, because it is related to the abortion debate, and unfortunately, Matt Gaetz is involved. Congressman Matt Gaetz has decided to double down on living in a glass house and throwing stones on the issue of abortion activists and whether or not they're attractive. Now, Matt Gaetz, who has to pay people for sex, and he's literally being investigated about that by the DOJ, wants to make a point about how women who are fighting for abortion rights are just not attractive. Here's what his original statement was.
Have you watched these pro-abortion, pro-murder rallies? The people are just disgusting. Like, why is it that the women with the least likelihood of getting pregnant are the ones most worried about having abortions? Nobody wants to impregnate you if you look like a thumb. These people are odious on the inside and out. They're like 5'2", 350 pounds, and they're like, give me my abortions or I'll get up and march and protest. And I'm thinking, march? You look like you got ankles weaker than the legal reasoning behind Roe versus Wade. A few of them need to get up and march. They need to get up and march for like an hour a day, swing those arms, get the blood pumping, maybe mix in a salad.
Interesting commentary for a guy who likes to fillet former President Donald Trump every opportunity he gets. An obese former president who can't be bothered to exercise because he has deluded himself into thinking that there is a finite amount of energy within us, and exercising depletes that energy, which is really, really bad for your health. Anyway, but when Matt Gaetz was asked about those comments, he did decide to double down. So let's hear what he had to say about that.
I'm very pro-life, and I make no apology for it. And I'm grateful that Roe has been overturned and that Dobbs is now the jurisprudence on abortion. And I find these people who go out in these pro-abortion, pro-murder rallies odious and just like ugly on the inside and out. And I make no apology for it. The ones that are out there protesting and marching outside Justice Kavanaugh's home, trying to threaten the court, that's just, it's just pure ugliness. And I see that ugliness on the inside, I see it on the outside.
Is it safe to say that based off of your comments, you're suggesting that these women at these abortion rallies are ugly and overweight?
Yes.
What do you say to people who think that those comments are offensive?
Be offended.
Okay, great. So let's play this game. Since he's totally fine with making comments like that, I'm sure he won't be offended when I show you a screenshot of the exact video, by the way, that you just saw. That's Matt Gaetz, who I wouldn't sleep with if the survival of the human race literally depended on it. I'm also 5'3", 115 pounds, and let's come back to me. Want to protect abortion rights, want to protect reproductive rights, and if I do say so myself, not an unattractive person, much like many of the other women out there who are fighting the good fight to ensure that we protect our rights, protect the relationship that we have between ourselves and our doctors, protect our decisions about our own bodies. Matt Gaetz has to literally pay women to sleep with him, and he has the audacity to judge the physical appearance of others. Please. Now, we have more to get to on this story, but Farron, why don't you jump in? Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe I'm being unfair by calling Matt Gaetz ugly, but again, would not sleep with him if the future of the human race depended on it.
I'm not gonna fault you for that. I mean, the guy looks like he needs to be sitting on a couch next to Beavis critiquing MTV videos. Not to mention the fact that this is a guy who up until what, like 2 years ago was very much overweight himself. Hey, congratulations, you did lose the weight, Matt. Something I struggle to do, but I look like a goblin, so I have no problem calling out Matt Gaetz for also looking like an absolute freak. Because this guy's got some serious demons inside him, both inside and out, by the way. Not to mention, this is a guy who, as you pointed out, we've got the Venmo receipts. We know you were paying women. The question I have is, were any of those payments used on any kind of medical procedures? Maybe something happened with some of the women, Matt? I mean, all of this is going to come out. We are going to get answers from this. Greenberg has been cooperating beautifully with prosecutors. He's not even gonna be sentenced until December now. And so that's probably the point where we will see the other indictments come out, because we do know they're coming. Gaetz' ex-girlfriend has been testifying. So this guy is out there running his mouth, talking about one, legal issues he doesn't even fully comprehend because he spent a year out of law school before he was elected to office. And two, insulting people when again, he looks like a cartoon character that also, and this is the most important part, the whole thing, what he said down at that Tampa event, he ripped that off from a 1996 George Carlin stand-up special, but Carlin was talking about the anti-abortion people. Gaetz just flipped it. So now he's stealing jokes. So he's Carlos Mencia, I guess, of the Republican Party, stealing other people's material for his own. It's pathetic, it's ridiculous, and of course he's gonna double down. And I live in his district, and these idiots here, sorry, but they're gonna vote for him again. They love that. And that's the worst part about living in this area. It's a beautiful, physically beautiful place. The people are all just as hideous as Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, I know I'm being a softie, but I hold out hope for voters in Florida, because the fact of the matter is people live in their own little media bubbles and they're fed nonstop propaganda. And I wanna believe that most Americans, and by the way, the polling does show this. Most Americans believe that people in general, including women, should be able to make decisions about their own healthcare, should not have the government between them and their doctors. And so I just wanna believe that if people were better informed by not existing in whatever media bubble they exist in, maybe they would rethink some of the policies coming from people like Matt Gaetz, which, by the way, what are the policies from Matt Gaetz? Other than engaging in manufactured culture wars, intentionally saying egregious or inflammatory things for attention. Like, what does Matt Gaetz really do for the people in his district in Florida? Nothing. Has he improved their lives in any way? No. But the problem is the media is not good at reporting that, right? The media falls for the manufactured culture war narratives coming from right-wing politicians time and time again. And I think that it's very much intentional by the Republican right wing to do this, because it also deflects from the unwillingness to do anything to materially benefit anyone's life is a huge negative mark for the Republican Party, but they're able to skirt any responsibility for that by purposely saying inflammatory things, much like what Matt Gaetz said in regard to those fighting for reproductive rights. And by the way, later he bragged about how his Turning Point USA speech, where he talked about ugly women, got the most attention of any speech at Turning Point USA. Congratulations. But I should also note that one of the women he went after, a woman named Olivia, who's also a fighter for reproductive rights, was able to raise $35,000 for an abortion fund in less than a day after Matt Gaetz specifically attacked her and the way she looks. Let's get right to our next story.
I don't think Matt Gaetz will have an impact on that. In fact, I'd be surprised if he was still voting. It's more likely he'll be in prison for child sex trafficking by 2024.
That was Mark Short, who served as chief of staff for former Vice President Mike Pence. He had a pretty spicy and accurate take in regard to Representative Matt Gaetz during his interview with CNN. Now let's take a look at the interview with a little more context.
Here's what Matt Gaetz said.
Our America is proudly ultra MAGA, not some low energy roadside rhino safari. On that note, let me just say what everybody here knows. Mike Pence will never be president. Nice guy, not a leader.
Mark?
Well, I don't know if Mike Pence will run for president in 2024, but I don't think Matt Gaetz will have an impact on that. In fact, I'd be surprised if he was still voting. It's more likely he'll be in prison for child sex trafficking by 2024. And I'm actually surprised that Florida law enforcement still allows him to speak to teenage conferences like that. So I'm not too worried about Matt Gaetz. Thanks.
There are very few pleasures in life here in the United States, especially these days. But watching Republican on Republican crime is probably my favorite pleasure. And I'm so happy I get to share it with you all here. Don't have any particular love for Mark Short, who is testifying before the January 6th committee. There's a lot of news around that, although he's tight-lipped about what his testimony entailed. But what he said about Matt Gaetz was accurate, and I loved every minute of it. Farron, thoughts?
We just witnessed a murder on live TV right there, and it was wonderful, to be honest with you. And Mark Short is right. I mean, when we look at a guy like Matt Gaetz, look at everything he's accused of. Should we put him in a room full of teenagers? Probably not. Maybe we ought to be a little bit more careful about who we put with all these underage individuals there. But I've covered this extensively, mostly because Gaetz, of course, is my congressman, unfortunately, right here. And Gaetz is in some serious trouble. I know he likes to pretend it's all a witch hunt and the guy that was trying to extort them, but this is a real big problem for him. Greenberg has been such a good, Joel Greenberg, the former Seminole County tax collector, has been such a good cooperating witness that he's had his sentencing delayed 3 or 4 times now. And they only did that because he was giving them such quality information. Now, what I was hoping for was that Greenberg would be sentenced early in August. That is initially what they were trying to do, but they've now pushed that back to December. So what's going to happen in this particular case, most likely, is we are not going to see any other criminal indictments until Joel Greenberg is safely locked away in prison. They do that obviously for protection. There's already been some leaks out of some things that have happened with Greenberg's cooperation, saying they're trying to keep a lot of it under wraps because they're afraid of witness intimidation. They're afraid of people fleeing. There's some serious stuff happening, and they want to make sure that everybody is safe and protected before they move forward with indictments. So December could see some big fireworks for this, and Mark Short's right. Matt Gaetz may not have really any opinion on 2024 because he could easily be behind bars.
Yeah, and
hopefully.
look, I mean, look, we experience many people in positions of power, particularly those in the executive branch, who seem to never suffer any consequences for their criminality, including war crimes under the Bush administration, et cetera, et cetera. However, we have seen members of Congress get tried and convicted of crimes. We have seen them get thrown in prison as a result of those crimes. So it's not far-fetched for the same consequences to be the outcome of this investigation by the DOJ, which, by the way, the DOJ began investigating Matt Gaetz and his alleged sexual relationship with a 17-year-old who he allegedly paid to have sex with, and who he allegedly paid to travel across state lines to have sex with, which, by the way, doing that is a federal crime. If he is convicted of those crimes, he's looking at a significant amount of time behind bars. And what I find so amazing about all of it is that you have people like Marjorie Greene and other QAnon believers who think that there's a massive Democrat-led child sex trafficking ring in the country. Whenever they're confronted with stories like this and accusations in regard to Matt Gaetz like this, they have nothing to say. In fact, they continue to defend Matt Gaetz, even though we don't know what the outcome of this investigation is gonna be. But I'm glad that you mentioned, Farron, that things are like, people are a little tight-lipped about this. And I've been wondering what the updates are, because we haven't really seen much reporting on the investigation into Matt Gaetz since January of this year. And so apparently it's still continuing, and you've got a little more insight than I did on that investigation. And for those of you who are wondering, what are you guys talking about? Because it has been a while since we've talked about it on the show. It's been a while since there's been much reporting on it. Here's the breakdown. Okay, I'll give you a quick summary. So the Washington Post wrote about it back in January. They write, investigators started looking into whether Joel Greenberg, who was referenced by Farron here, a wealthy Florida politician who is now a convicted sex trafficker, made up a sexual misconduct allegation to smear his opponent during a county tax collector race. And the investigation expanded to sexual trafficking and to Matt Gaetz. Now, Greenberg, Gaetz's Florida friend, has pleaded guilty to sex trafficking, charges of a minor, charges of a minor, and he's now fully cooperating with investigators who seem focused on people beyond Greenberg. In fact, a number of allies around Gaetz seem to have turned on him. Again, another reference that you made, Farron. Prosecutors have convened a federal grand jury to look into Gaetz and have had his ex-girlfriend testify potentially into his behavior with women and any trips he took with women while paying for sex. And by the way, Matt Gaetz stupidly was paying women through the Venmo app without making his Venmo activity private. So there was some reporting on that. Seemed like there was some large payments made to women. That's all under investigation. And by the way, it's also important to remember that in 2017, Matt Gaetz was literally the only member of Congress to vote against a law boosting the government's human trafficking investigation powers, saying that he was sent to Congress to reduce the reach of government, even in cases when we're talking about humans being trafficked. Interesting.
Well, what we know about this case as well is that there are 5 unnamed individuals. They're named in the sealed court documents. What has been released publicly, the names are redacted. But there's 5 individuals basically that are the targets of the ongoing investigation and the cooperation of Greenberg. We do not technically, have confirmation that Matt Gaetz is one of those 5. But it stands to reason, given all of the information we know Greenberg has turned over about Matt Gaetz, and of course now again prosecutors got the ex-girlfriend to testify. You don't bring in Matt Gaetz's ex-girlfriend to testify against somebody that's not Matt Gaetz, right? I mean, that just doesn't seem plausible here. So it stands to reason Gaetz is one of the 5, but then who are the other 4 of this very politically connected former Florida politician? We could see some other big names in there. And right now we have absolutely no clue who those people could be. It could be maybe people with presidential ambitions. We don't know, but we will, like I said, once he gets sentenced, we're gonna see some indictments drop. We're gonna hear some big names. Maybe it's Gaetz, maybe not, but we're gonna find out. And like I said, it's gonna be big, big, big when it finally goes down. But they're not doing it till Greenberg is safe in prison.
Can't wait to see what happens, but I do love to see the difference between how Republicans fight back versus how Democrats fight back. Because attacking Matt Gaetz for this DOJ investigation, in my opinion, is just common sense. It's low-hanging fruit, and you don't see Democrats going after him for that. It took another Republican, Mark Short, to do it. And I think that says a lot about the kind of messaging and the type of politicking we see among Democratic voters. They don't have a fight in them if their life depended on it. And it's just so pathetic to see. Well, I want to get one more story done in the first hour today. And we just mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's making another appearance on the show. Let's get right to it.
I call myself a nationalist. So you see, I also call myself a Christian nationalist. And that's not a bad word. That's actually a good thing, right?
Marjorie Greene has caught some feelings after the phrase nationalist came up in her speech. This isn't the first time she's referred to herself as a proud nationalist. In response to that, people started calling her a Nazi, and she didn't like that. It was trending on Twitter. So she felt the need to defend herself and said, you know what? I'm a Christian nationalist. There's nothing wrong with that. So here are the comments Greene made during her speech before the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit in Tampa, Florida. I want you to watch it in more context, and then I'll tell you how she's trying to defend herself and how it's really been a fruitless effort.
So you see, I also call myself a Christian nationalist. And that's not a bad word. That's actually a good thing, right? And there's nothing wrong with leading with your faith, because we should lead with our faith. Because if we're doing that, then we're doing the right thing.
Farron, I'm wondering whether you think she genuinely knows what it means to be a Christian nationalist and she's proudly touting that regardless, or if she's just so stupid that she doesn't understand what being a Christian nationalist means, what the historical implications of that means. Like, I don't know if she really understands what she's saying.
You know, that's always been my problem with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and even with Gaetz and Boebert and Cawthorn and the whole creepy crew, is trying to figure out who's acting and who is genuine. You know, and we see it a lot with the grifters on the right as well. You know, who's pretending to be something, who is actually this horrible thing. They're all terrible. But I think with Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think she's just genuinely stupid. I mean, she graduated college. She's got a degree, a bachelor's degree in business administration. So obviously not heavy on history, you know, unless she took a bunch of electives that we don't know about. But I think she is genuinely not informed and has no idea what she is saying or doing. I would love to think that she is doing this maliciously, and I think now she knows. I think somebody told her, and that's why she's still doubling down on it. Like, oh, I like that even more.
Probably, yeah.
But I think we're just dealing with somebody who's, you know, she's not necessarily the brightest bulb in that congressional chandelier.
No,
I'll just put it that way.
She's incredibly stupid. Like, I mean, let's just call it what it is. She is incredibly stupid. She does not understand what this country was supposed to be. She doesn't even care for what this country was supposed to be and what it was supposed to represent. And the problem with being a Christian nationalist is that it goes against the very core, the very foundation of this country. It goes against literally like the First Amendment to the Constitution. And I'll get to those details, but in response to her statement, she was called a Nazi And she couldn't understand why she was being called a Nazi. Don't worry, Marjorie, we'll explain it in just a moment. She says, quote, I am being attacked by the godless left because I said I'm a proud Christian nationalist. These evil people are even calling me a Nazi because I proudly love my country and my God. The left has shown us exactly who they are. They hate America, they hate God, and they hate us. So let's just make a few things clear. You hate America. We have a very clear separation of church and state. The government shall not establish religion. It is in our Constitution, but she doesn't care. And look, it's totally fine to be a proud Christian. Totally fine to be proud of your country, to love your country. In fact, I think most people, even despite the criticisms and critiques they might have for the country and where we are today, do love the country. I remember we did a story recently where a bunch of Polish LARPers were like mocking the way Americans live in the middle of the country. And I got super offended. Like I didn't expect to, but I got super offended by it because I'm like, no, these are our people. Don't mock us. I'm not okay with that, because I do love this country and I do love the people in it, even those I might disagree with politically. I'm not talking about the politicians. I'm talking about ordinary people, right? Who wanna, maybe share their ideas. We might disagree, but let's have a debate about it. And let's not hate each other because we might have a different perspective. But what we see with Marjorie Taylor Greene is a significant, and you can see it like this distrust toward what America is supposed to be, a hatred toward what our Constitution actually entails. And I wonder if she's ever even read the Constitution. She says nationalist isn't a bad word. It means you care about your country. I'm sure there are plenty of people in this country who love it, who care about it, and don't refer to themselves as a nationalist because they know what nationalism means. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene might or might not know what nationalism means. If she does know what it means, then it's incredible that we have members of Congress who are touting nationalism, including Christian nationalism, which does have a pretty dark history. Christian nationalism is defined as the belief that the American nation is defined by Christianity, and that the government should take active steps to keep it that way, according to an article published by Christianity Today in 2021. Critics of Christian nationalism, including hundreds of evangelical leaders, which honestly is a little shocking, argue that it violates the separation of church and state while also encouraging discrimination against people of non-Christian faiths and those who do not follow any religion. Newsweek published that, and I wish there was a little more specificity because I have yet to see any evangelical leaders say anything like that. Have you ever seen an evangelical leader, Farron, go, Christian nationalism is very, very bad. We got to look out for our atheist and agnostic brothers and sisters. Please.
No, all we hear from them is that, hey, you guys are all going to hell for everything that you believe, everything that you are. That's what they are. So yeah, that was that stuck out to me too. Is like, really? Can we maybe get some documentation to back this up? Maybe some videos or statements written by these people. But again, it all comes down to, does she even understand what she's saying? Does she even have the capacity to understand this? And like you said, she's probably never read the Constitution. It's not exactly a fun read. And there's a lot of, very old words that are difficult to pronounce. The way they write it is not similar to how we write today. So no, I don't think she has read it. But what they've done, people like her, they've created this different version of the Constitution, this different version of American history in their brains. They've fed it to their supporters, and that is actually what they believe now. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter what the history is, the history that you and I know and understand. They're either believing their own alternate reality, or they're just simply rewriting the history itself, as we're seeing with the textbooks issue here. So eventually their history is unfortunately probably going to be what's taught if we can't stop this onslaught of just Republican, forced ideology on us.
And as Reverend Leah Shade wrote perfectly on Twitter, Christian nationalism was the religion of the Third Reich. Christian nationalism is definitely something to be afraid of. And so I think that there are people in this country who tout Christian nationalism knowing exactly what it means. And I think you're also right, Farron, in that if Marjorie Greene didn't know what Christian nationalism meant before, she certainly does now. And she has decided to double down. And that is not something to celebrate, especially when we're talking about a member of Congress who doesn't believe in our constitutional rights and doesn't believe that the First Amendment of the Constitution explicitly prohibits Congress from making any law respecting an establishment of religion. She hates this country. She says she loves it, but she hates everything it really represents, everything it's supposed to represent. And she wants to force her beliefs onto everyone else. And honestly, every time we cover these stories, I can't help but think about Ben Shapiro. Because Ben, like, what are you doing, bro? What are your thoughts on this? You're gonna keep enabling this? Because I know you ain't Christian. You should be able to practice your religion. I support that 100%. The party that you shill for doesn't believe that 100%. Anyway, Farron, you're amazing. Thank you for your patience today with all our tech issues. Hopefully you'll come back on again soon. Let everyone know where they can find your work.
Absolutely. The big YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Ring of Fire. I also have my separate channel, youtube.com/Farron Balanced. And I am Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and a TikTok account that I haven't posted anything to. All of those you can find me at Farron Balanced.
Love it. All right, everyone, we're gonna take a short break and we'll be right back with Wosny Lambre for hour 2.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.